Well, I want to thank Mr. Jaffrey and, of course, Roveda Cosme, for all the really wonderful support. Anyway, I suppose I should say good afternoon because it's morning here and afternoon by you. Let me just, I had some thoughts about starting. Even the title, Keys to Captivating an Audience. You know, on the best of, in the normal circumstances, that might be a little bit bold, you know, as a title. Certainly in this situation, it's even more than that when I think about the fact that I really don't know very much about Saudi culture. So, you know, I want to be seen as an expert, but I also know it's important to be humble. In fact, I'd like to share two sort of stories that I think talk about how do you start immediately connecting and captivating an audience. Well, first, let's look at this opening screen. Do you see the colors of head? You know, keys to captivating an audience. Engaging head is gold, heart is red, spirit, dark green, and soul. Now I'm going to focus on the spirit. As I was looking at the words and thinking of colors, it suddenly occurred to me, what's the color of the Saudi flag? And sure enough, I discovered it was dark green, because that's the sort of the symbol of Islam. And I read where it was a favorite color of Prophet Muhammad and his daughter Fatima. So already I was thinking of, you know, this, how do you connect to an audience even before, you know, doing the presentation. Another a story that I'd like to share that really begins to get to the essence of captivating. It was mentioned that I have done work with the Nepali community in the United States. And that's been a very, you know, tremendous learning experience for me. This was started, this group, Be Well Initiative, was started by a colleague and friend who, if you might recall, about 2.5 years ago, there were these tremendous earthquakes in Nepal. And he called, he was Nepali, a health analyst for the Washington, D.C. government. And Dr. Gurung, of course, wanted to talk about some of his anxiety, but he also wanted to share a vision. His anxiety because he had family and friends in Nepal, but he wanted to share a vision. He knew that in his community, in the Nepali community in the United States, mental health issues, stress, depression, loss, were issues that were very difficult to get people to talk openly about. We have a phrase, they were in the closet. These were kind of sort of shameful issues to talk about. And he was determined to find ways to reach out to the community, educate, and share a more open view of mental health. And one of the things we did was did various events in the community. And one of the events, we were at a health fair on the campus of George Washington University, a very diverse culture. And sure enough, people would come up to my table, our table, and I had what I would use as my natural speed quiz to engage people. And natural speed stands for SPPEED. And natural speed stands for sleep, priorities, passion, empathy, exercise, and diet. I think I forgot to include that in the slide, but I think you can follow. Sleep, priorities, passion, empathy, exercise, and diet. And I would suddenly start asking people, how many hours of sleep do you get? Do you get at least 6 or 7? Why is it so important? What priorities? Are you comfortable saying no to people? Can you disappoint people? And in other words, I was just interacting with, people that came by, and he was amazed that many of these folks who didn't speak great English, but they were engaged by the questions. He and I sort of just enjoy it, and I bring a lot of energy, and he was just surprised that it, had such a compelling and captivating impact. And in fact, recently he belatedly told me that, Mark, kind of sheepishly, I decided to use. I was speaking at a conference, and I decided to use your speed model. I hope that's okay. And I said, sure. And in fact, he said, a regional director of Nokia, big communications company, came up to him afterwards and said, hey, can I use that model, in my company? And DK said, well, let me speak to, the inventor first. But that's what I call captivating. That is, you engage people's head and heart, spirit, and we're going to define spirit as sort of like a higher power, something that people can strive for, their greater self, whether we call that love, God, or just a deeper consciousness. And soul is your sort of deeper memory and deeper pain, in my perspective. So anyway, let's move on a little bit. But I wanted you to just get a sense of what happens when you captivate people. They want the information. They want what you know. They want to connect with you. So what are some of the other things that we're going to focus on today? Well, we're going to talk about energy. How do you bring your best energy, expression, and flow? Some tips for becoming a compelling communicator. We'll even take a look at maybe dealing with power struggles in an effective way. We'll share my 5P model of passion power and give you some thoughts on how you can bring that to life. But here are 3 key leadership questions that I really would like to, emphasize. Are you courageously developing and passionately bringing your unique energy, experience, and expertise to whatever relationship or work situation that's unfolding? And related is, do you have grit? Do you have staying power? And if you're knocked down on your derriere, as we say, can you bounce back? Do you have resilience? Are you truly, the second is, are you truly being heard, or are you just making noise? And think about this, in our smartphone culture, it's so hard to get people's attention. So we've got to be a little bit more distinctive as a communicator, as a leader, and we'll talk about some strategies for that. And finally, are you developing diverse, mutually productive, and innovative partnerships? We know that the more diverse teams tend to be more creative. Why? Because you can't get on the same page so quickly. Diversity sometimes can be frustrating because there's conflict, but if you can really engage the conflict genuinely and really give all parties a chance to give input, what's often in the U.S. military called a helmets off environment. And why helmets off? Because you have the rank on the helmet. And the challenge is, if you take your helmets off, there's no rank in the room. But of course, the challenge is, how do you get the corporal to speak up when the colonel's also in the room? So we have to work hard to break down status barriers and rank barriers to allow for this genuine give and take. And that's why some of the more progressive leaders in the military brought me in to create an environment before they would go into their secret meetings to make sure that the senior officers and the senior sergeants in this case really were talking openly and honestly with each other. Okay, so those are three key questions. Now, I just want to set the framework a little bit. I mentioned the words compelling and captivating. What do those words mean to you? I think there's a subtle difference. So let's look at the screen. Compelling is when the information is very interesting. It holds your attention. It's able to capture you. It's capable of causing someone to believe or agree. It's strong and forceful, causing you to feel that you must do something. So there's some kind of a feeling like you are following, the listener is following this very strong presence. And in a way, that's power-related, and it's related to the more traditional notion of being an authority, being a leader. In fact, one of the commanders told me that, in a way, this is related to being able to order people. But he said, Mark, it's easy to order people. It's hard to create buy-in. So let's think about that. So how do you create buy-in? Well, one way, in addition to that helmets off and really having free-flowing discussion amongst the participants, is to be passionate, to captivate, to capture interest as if by a spell. Now, we don't have to be a magician, but we have to, as I shared with the natural speed, we have to put information in a way, and we have to present that information in a way that people feel our energy, feel our passion, so that they want to get. I know, for example, people come up to me often after a workshop and say, Mark, you have great energy. And of course, I thank them. But what is really being said? How do I get some of that energy? How do I get some of that spirit? And that's what we want to be a model for people. We want to develop our own and then be able to share it with others. So passion is to influence and dominate by a special, less a charm, but a trait, an art, a communication art, having an irresistible appeal. So look at the difference between compelling, push, pull, something outside the person that's almost like a goal. There's something on the horizon that I want to reach for. Focus and flow, head and heart, insight and intrigue, purpose and possibility. Clearly, we're most inspiring when we can integrate being compelling and being passionate. Providing compelling information or data and having a compassionate delivery. So let's just, we talked a little bit about the difference between order and buy-in. What are the pros and cons of each communication style? Well, clearly, oftentimes in an emergency or in a crisis situation, we don't have time to really tease out people's desires and deeper soulful concerns. Someone's got to be in the lead and has to provide that clear communication, has to be compelling. But many times, it's not a crisis situation. And here is where, as great leaders, we want to speak both to people's heads and hearts, their spirit and soul. So this is just a fundamental, I think, as a leader. How do you really engage people in this, really full sense of the word. One way to do that, when you have time, is to ask exploratory questions to show people new possibilities. This Asia 3Bs. I was doing a workshop with some Asian health people that work for a health organization. This was this was in Cleveland, actually. And they too were concerned about how do we engage the community in mental health related issues, talk about stress, talk about depression, talk about domestic problems. And I told them, well, I didn't tell them. I said, and they were concerned that this would be a real obstacle in the community. And I said, let's try my 3B stress barometer exercise. And basically, maybe there were 15 people in the room, so I broke them up into 3 groups of 5. And I said, let's try this exercise. So I call it my 3B exercise, 3B stress barometer exercise. How does your brain, your body, and your behavior let you know when you're under more stress than usual? How does your brain, body, and behavior let you know when you're under more stress than usual? And suddenly they were in each group talking amongst themselves, sharing, laughing, and they got it. They were captivated. They began to see how, by just creating a small group, raising a simple question, how does your brain, body, and behavior let you know when you're under more stress than usual? They could begin to open up and talk about things that most of the time are kept quiet, kept in the closet. So asking good questions really engages people, really gets them into the experience. Now, at the end, I may talk more about different ways as a team that you can engage people. Or maybe I should just, the wavelength session, for example, and 2 hats and rotation. One of the things I recommend leaders, team leaders, is to don't always run the meeting yourself. 3 things. First, wear 2 hats. Be a member of the team, not just the leader. Let other people rotate the facilitator role. Let other people roll, team members rotate in the leadership position. People playing that position have more of a sense of investment and commitment. And next, if you have like a 45-minute meeting, leave 15 minutes for what I call the wavelength section. Don't just talk about time, numbers, and technology in that meeting. Leave 15 minutes to talk about how are we really working together as a team? Where are the bumps? Where are we doing well? Where do we have to communicate better? Is there any frustration? So really have it a more open, that helmets off section of your team meeting. Excuse me. Now, some tools, things that I've evolved over the many years thinking about this, communication, more and more, and especially in light of the new technology, we need the new KISS. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard, it's been a sort of an old expression in the United States or maybe elsewhere. Keep it simple, stupid. And I've never liked that. It's kind of demeaning. That's, a training expression. Keep it simple, stupid. No. How about now, keep it short and smart, or even simple and smart. So we can see, what's a good example of, well, I think I told you the natural speed story. Actually, I didn't finish the story, so let me complete it. So, well, I did, because DK then, really shared it with others, and they wanted to use it. So So something that really, as we said, captures people's imagination, really, and language can do that. Like, for example, I have two slogans. A firm no a day keeps the ulcers away, and the hostilities too. And do know your limits and don't limit your nose. So expressions can really capture people's imagination. Make it sassy and surprising, the memorableness. Creating surprise can be a very powerful way of getting people's attention. For example, and we'll get to it, we'll get to other parts of it, but let me highlight, like at some point, I'll just turn to an audience and simply say, you know, I've been sharing information. What do you think about this guy up here? That is me. What's your impression, even after only 5 minutes? And suddenly, we've shifted the whole sort of ground. And then I use that, of course, to ultimately get them to talk about their energy, because often they comment on that, and we'll get to that. But that's what I mean by creating surprise. Again, less is more. Stand out. Don't just be outstanding. In other words, how do you present your unique self? Okay, let's here's a process for becoming captivating. The 5 A's for arousing, connecting, and energizing communication. And we've touched on some of these. But first, attention. Can you get people to stop, look, and listen? You've got to really get people's attention these days. So you've got to be saying something or presenting yourself in a way that people, get their heads out of their phones and are, focused on you. The way to really sustain that is be a little edgy. I want people on the edge of their seats. What is this guy going to do next? It's not, you don't have to be so perfectly polished and in control, but you want to be thought-provoking. In fact, that reminds me, one great way, I call it getting fit, F-I-T. I want to help an audience get fit. I want to make things fun, interactive, and thought-provoking. And that's really, I think, a great, in fact, I was talking with someone at a restaurant, and I was sitting at the bar watching a football game, and he was, suddenly when he saw that I was studying some notes, and you're doing a program on communications? Oh, I'm a trainer for, this academy. Oh, let me tell you what you should do. And I'm listening. Okay. And so he gives me a couple of good tips, asks questions, and good. And then at some point I said, well, I like to, just what I said, I'd like to help audiences get fit. And it said, that stands for fun, interaction, and thought-provoking. And you know what his response was? Oh, wow, can I use that? That's what I mean by captivating. I suddenly gave him a vision or a new way of expressing himself. So I want people to be always, what's going to happen next? Animation. Anima really relates to the word spirit. Inspiration. That's the image of God breathing life into man, into the human species. Animation, I also think, is when you can touch people's spirit and soul. And when I think of animated cartoons, I think of the energy and the juice and a little bit of craziness that goes on in animated cartoons. And again, every personality will be different. Some will be more comfortable, some will be less comfortable in bringing a very extrovertish or a more introvertish source of energy. But whatever your predilection, whatever your style, you can bring more energy. And activation, help people, and this is where I often use exercises. I want to go from presenting concepts and ideas to people, and then really getting involved in exercises, a little bit like that 3B stress barometer exercise where I had the Nepali health people, talking about stress, how it affects their brain, body, and behavior. So whenever I introduce a concept, I very quickly move into exercise mode, or conversely, if we have an exercise, then I debrief from the exercise, emphasizing key concepts, tools, and techniques. So we want to activate. We want to get people really involved in skill building and team building. And then finally, actualization. How do I promote the AAA? As you can see, I'm a founding member of a new, I don't know if you're familiar with 12-step groups, but those are support groups. But I'm a founding member of 12-step group, Acronyms Anonymous, and that's what it is. So, authority, autonomy, and accountability. If you want individuals and organizations to really have a sense of, real commitment, you want to make sure that people have a sense of their authority. They're not being micromanaged. There's some autonomy, and everyone is held to a high and attainable standard of accountability. And actualization also involves this ongoing collaborative, creative collaborative journey where we're partnering with different people and really creating synergy. We probably all have heard synergy, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But what does that really mean, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts? What that involves is that the communication amongst the parts, amongst the people, is so rich and so freeing that 2 plus 2 can equal 5, because you have two people, and the communication between those groups is what gives the extra added dimension. Then for me, the real magic of whole is greater than the sum of the parts, synergy, is when the parts become partners. So this would be an exercise that I would quickly get a group into, and I know we can't, really do it today, but when do you have your best personal energy? So think about that. What circumstances enable you to express this energy and go with the flow? What factors stifle courageous and creative head and heart energy? What is the connection between pain, purpose, passion, power, and letting go? What makes letting go so challenging? Letting go in the short run creates uncertainty and anxiety, but in the long run opens up many possibilities because we've invested so much. In fact, if no matter what you do or how hard you try, results, rewards, recognition, and relief are not forthcoming. And you can't say, no, it won't let go, throw the weights. The groundwork is being laid for apathy, callousness, and despair. You've invested, so much time, identity, money, energy, ego in one right person, one right position, one right acceptable outcome. That's when trouble awaits. The groundwork is being laid for apathy, callousness, and despair. So knowing how to let go, it's not surrendering, it's not giving up. It's stepping back to get a new perspective, to maybe take a breather, to take what I call an incubation vacation, to hatch a new insight. Now, letting go involves many things. We're just going to briefly know some of these, loss of control dreams, ego issues where you're putting your ego in front of the real goal. All these things can impede our ability to let go. And we might even talk a little bit more about disarming power struggles. So when do you have your best energy? I was thinking about this. When do I have my best energy? In a fight or flight situation. You know, I feel a sense of injustice. I'm going to take a stand. And sometimes I may need to fight or let go, to step back and regroup. Also, when I really sense a focus and flow, I'm really into a project or really into a presentation. And I'm also sensing, as I am now, that time is running short and I've got to really push to the finish line. When I'm trying to create intimacy and insight to an idea, intimacy with another person, when I'm exploring new circumstances and ideas, when I'm reaching in, whether it's through dream work or reaching out for new research, feedback, and especially my definition of a leader is one who orchestrates. He's an orchestra leader, or she's an orchestra leader, helping individuals and teams bring out their best music. So I want to be an orchestra leader, helping individuals and teams bring out their best music. If I'm challenged, when I'm challenged, that gets my energy going. And expressing my uniqueness. I call it being your fullest self, hopefully without being full of yourself. I tell people why I enjoy this work is I can express many different sides of myself. I can go from the cave, where I'm that introspective thinker and reflective, to being on stage, where I really want to share my passion, my ideas, my emotions. So what are some of the ways to inspire? We've talked about design language and ideas, bring words alive, paint pictures. Mark Twain, the great American humorist, said, "Wit is the sudden marriage of ideas which before their union were not perceived to have any relation." You want to mix those concepts and exercises. Be courageous, but courageous doesn't mean just feats of daring, but revealing yourself. Allowing yourself as a leader sometimes to be vulnerable, taking off the be perfect mask, inviting criticism. Be unconventional, speak the unspeakable. I see too. You know, some of you may have heard the expression, there's no I in team. Well, that didn't work for me. How about there may be no I in team, but there are two I's in winning. W-I-N-N-I-N-G. And these I's can see. Winning teams blend individual creativity and interactive community. In our world today, how do we blend high tech and human touch? We talked about be surprising, defy expectations, and employ self-effacing humor. This is humor where we can poke a little fun at ourselves. But it's not being, you know, some people say, oh, he's poking fun of ourselves, he's really very insecure. No, poking fun of ourselves really gives a message of acceptance. This is who I am. I can accept my flaws and foibles. Other people feel a real sense of admiration that you're being so courageous. And there's an element of aggression. Go ahead, you know, make fun of me. I can make fun of myself a lot better than you can. So you could see that feistiness. It's not all just being overly humble. And research, Daniel Goleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence, found that the most effective managers use humor 3 times more often than their least effective counterparts. Okay, we're going to probably finish up in about 3 minutes. So how do we get ourselves ready for this kind of what I call IM for performance leadership? One, do you have an imaginative mind? Now, that doesn't mean just being inherently creative. Do you do preparation? Do you think about, how can I connect with my Saudi audience in a way that goes beyond just saying As-salamu alaikum, which someone suggested I do. And of course, I'm a big believer in peace be with you and with all of us. But I wanted to, make it my own signature. And that's where I came up with the concept of what's the color of the Saudi flag, and making the word spirit dark green and doing a little reading on that. That's what I mean by taking time to really make new connections and models. Informative message, the KISS into play, keep it short and smart. Connect data and concept, skill and exercise application. Be an inspiring messenger, a real and risk-taking individual, bringing his or her full self to the arena. Be vital and vulnerable. And finally, interactive medium, that sharing, learning, bonding lab that small groups provide, and that what I call participatory performance platform, inviting synergy. And we've basically have gone over this. This is just a little further application. You know what? We're going to probably wrap up in about 2 minutes. So power struggles. Well, that's so important because we all get into them. Why do we get into power struggles? These are the 6 C's. Who's going to be in control? Competition, change, cultural diversity, competency, control. It's like the parent-child or the authority dynamic. We see that a lot in the workplace. Competition, sibling rivalry. Who's favored? Times have changed. People get anxious. They want to be in more control. Certainly, we know cultural diversity can create misunderstandings. Do we have the communication skills to find the past and the impasse? And do we have the courage to employ them? I do a power struggle exercise where I pair people off. You can't make me, oh, yes, I can. And it's amazing, the energy. And I have these people actually thinking about someone who's a pain in their neck. And so they're looking at a person who's, just a partner, but they're thinking of someone who's a pain. And then they both say, you can't make me, oh, yes, I can. Back and forth. The energy in the room is astounding. Once when I was working with military spouses who have to, often hold in their feelings to be strong for their soldier. When they did this exercise, the level of noise and energy was so great, they were finally getting a chance to release, that the soldiers later told me they almost stormed the room because they thought a riot was breaking out. That's what I mean by really engaging an audience. Okay. I think because we want a lot of time for questions, I'm ready to pause now and entertain questions. Hello?
Yes, Mark, thank you very much for a very, very intriguing presentation. Folks, we are now open for question and answers. So if you have any questions, you could either insert in the question box or you could equally raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the console, so please click on it if you want to speak directly with the speaker. So let me go to the question box. There's a short one from Brother Mahmoud Qutub. The question is, what does managers stand for? MGRS basically he's used the acronym MGRS, so I'm assuming it means managers. What does managers stand for?
Right. Now, I'm not sure what he means by that question. mean, what are the values of a manager? Or what is the job description of a manager?
Brother
Hello?
Brother Mahmoud, who have inserted this question in the question box. So if you want to raise hand to talk directly to clarify or just
Sure, please.
supplement it in the question box. Okay, he has raised his hand, so let me go and try to unmute him. Brother Muhammad Kutab, I'm trying to unmute you. Okay, you're unmuted now, brother.
Yes,
Use yourself and ask the question and clarify exactly what the speaker asked. So thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Muhammad, I am asking what does the abbreviation stand for, because I didn't got
Talk a little, excuse me, sir. Can you talk a little slower so I can really hear you?
Okay, MGRS, I didn't understand its meaning at the beginning, okay? So after Mr. Muhammad said managers, I got it. Thank you.
Oh,
Well,
can someone...
Okay.
Yeah. Your audio quality is a bit on the lower side, so if you can raise your own voice and speak a little bit slow so the speaker can, understand and accordingly answer your questions.
Okay, Mr. Muhammad.
Yes, please. Yeah,
okay.
Now you're clear.
At the beginning, I saw the word MGRS. I didn't understand that it stands for managers, but now I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
You're welcome.
Hello?
All right. Thank you very much, Brother Kutab, for your question.
I'm sorry.
We have another one who is raising the, basically, let me try to unmute. Brother Fatwa Abu Mustafa, you have been trying to interact on the question box. I've unmuted you. Can you introduce yourself and ask the question, Brother Fatwa?
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Fatwa, we can hear you. Please.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I just would like to ask, like sometimes, managers would be faced with several, what we call them, concerns or issues within their environment, and trying to sort these issues with keeping like extreme non-bias, with one party, non-bias of being with one party than, other party. How can we really handle such situations and keeping in mind that as much as possible, the emotion sometimes goes in the way, between the manager and also the staff. Of course, we are at the end human beings. How can we sort that? How can we be sure that our emotions will not be affect the whole scenario?
Let me give you some thoughts on that. Thank you for the very interesting and pertinent question. One of the things I might want to do if you have this kind of misunderstanding, conflict, is first maybe meet with each of these individuals separately and begin to get a sense where you think they're being objective and where you think they're being overly emotional. At the same, then if you can establish a little bit of rapport with each of those individuals, then you can probably bring them together and at least reduce some of the tension in the room because they feel you are trustworthy and you will eat both sides. Now, sometimes we know that issues aren't just objective, they're very subjective. There's something, maybe someone brings some tension from home into the workplace. Or maybe issues with a parent, let's say someone had a critical father and this supervisor or this colleague has been criticizing. So that person's reaction is going to be extra strong. What we have in the US, and I don't know if you have this resource, you might, I suspect some of your companies do, is what's called an employee assistance program. That is, if you cannot get the two parties really working together because you think one party has, some kind of strong emotional reaction, overreaction, we have what's called a place where they can talk to an objective counselor. So that's one option. The other is to see if you can create, after you've talked with them for a short time, can you create a project where maybe the three of you or the two of them can work for a short amount of time together and see if they can begin to repair their communication. It's going to be, there's going to be some emotional communication, and that's not all bad. It's when it becomes extreme, because allowing people to talk about their emotions really gives you an opportunity to find out what do they fear, what do they hope for. Emotions get past the mask of logic. So we have to be comfortable in dealing with people's emotions. However, as I said, you're not a therapist, you're a manager.
Yes.
And so if someone is really having extremely strong emotional reaction, it's not your role to handle it. It's your role to help them get the help that they might need in sorting out their emotions so they can be a more effective employee. Does that make sense?
Employees. Yes, sure. Clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Sister Fatwa, for asking the question. Now let me go to another caller who has raised his hand. We have our caller, Brother Mohammed Sheriff. Brother Mohammed Sheriff, you've muted yourself, so I'm trying to unmute you. Yeah, you're unmuted now, brother. Could you please introduce yourself and ask questions again? Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for this very informative presentation. This is Mahmoud. I'm calling from the Medical Care Horizon in Saudi Arabia. I do believe the same as you are saying, that the manager should have the sense of humor. It's not a matter of just directing people and controlling and doing all the tasks of a manager, but he has to have this sort of, as you're saying, the sense of humor to capture the audience. My question is that do you think that the way you need to capture, or the event you need to present to bring their attention or pull them out from where they are to the topic or the subject of your meeting or your presentation, it should be relevant to that one, or you can just pick up anything from the newspaper of today or an event that happens to you while you're driving your car coming to the office, or would you highlight something to that? Because what we're afraid of that,
Yeah.
sometimes yeah, please.
I think I understand. How can the humor or the initial attempt to gain people's attention and make a connection, not just gain attention, but you want to connect with your audience. You want them to know on some level that you are interested in them and concerned about them and curious. And how do I say this? One example, I was speaking at a conference for a government agency that worked with blind people in Texas. And about a third of the participants, maybe there were, 130 people there, so let's say maybe 40 were blind themselves or legally blind. And I had never been around such a large number of people who were not sighted. And so it was, I could tell I felt a little, unsure. And one of this blind woman said, "Don't worry, Mark, just be yourself, say what you want, and that'll be fine. You can say you see." Anyway, that evening we were driving to a restaurant, and obviously a sighted manager was driving, but in addition to myself, there were two other people in the back who were blind. And at one point we got lost, and so, you know, the driver gave me her cell phone, which I hadn't, back then I didn't have a cell phone. So, and the two people in the back are using their cell phones, I guess the audio kind of component, to try to find out directions. Anyway, we were all lost because I didn't know how to work my phone. And I had a thought, but I stifled myself. I had a phrase came to mind, but I stifled myself. Anyway, I had slept on it, and the next morning I realized I'm going to tell this story. And I did, and I shared, this is, you know, the opening of my keynote speech. And I said, you know, we went to, you know, we were driving and we got lost, and then people started pulling out cell phones, and each one is calling out different directions. And when she turned over her cell phone to me, and I didn't know what I was doing, you know, that immediate thought was that I wasn't able to say initially. It was, this feels like the blind leading the blind. And everybody laughed. So what's my answer? Try to make your humor not just totally, you know, I don't tell jokes per se. I want to bring my humor, I want to connect it with the audience, with the people, something that we can all relate to. Now, if it's, you know, something that really is universal, that's okay too. But the more I can make my story, my humor, really relevant to the people that I'm addressing, I think that's where it has its greatest impact. I hope that clarifies.
Yes, it did clarify. Should I tell them that, you know, blind, you know, manage another blind, they will fire me, sir. But, you know, I'll take your advice.
I'm sorry, what was that last sentence?
I say, should I say as a manager to them, blind, directing a blind in my meeting, they will fire me.
Oh,
sure.
No, that's so the point is, you're right. You have to be sensitive to context. That's very important. With the group that I was in and with their culture, it was very appropriate and they appreciated it. But you're making an excellent point, and let's underscore that. There's a difference between what I call healing humor and hostile humor. And we need to be very careful when using humor to make sure that, you know, we're not going to be putting down people as an expense for a joke or violating, you know, cultural standards of what's appropriate or not. So you make a very good point that in some contexts, I certainly would not use that story. The other part about humor is the more that we can poke gentle fun at ourselves, people appreciate that. In fact, one of the exercises I do, especially I like to do with leaders and managers, is a group exercise where I call it my 4-word exercise. Share an embarrassing moment. Why is that so powerful? Because so often, you know, as leaders, as managers, we feel we have to be, you know, in control. Everyone has to see us as strong. But in fact, when people see that you can acknowledge some of your own flaws and foibles, you know, not kind of laugh at yourself a little bit in a good-natured way, what does that do? One, they respect you more. They see that you're really human. And two, it frees them up. Oh, if manager Ali is not so perfect, maybe I don't have to be perfect either. And that's the problem when people feel they have to be perfect. It's not that they have to be perfect. It's that they won't talk about when things are wrong. They don't want to show any sign of inadequacy. What does that mean? That means you're not going to really find out what's going on in the trenches in your organization. If people are so worried about, you know, feeling like if they're not perfect, they're going to be perceived as not good enough, you're not going to get the information that you need. Okay, thank you. Any more?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Brother Mohammed Sheriff, for asking the question. Now, that really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Let me see if I can. I have that last question. I'd like to conclude with a poem that I wrote. And it's not that long, but it's called Cowardice or Choice, From Vice to Voice. Now, the first line is a line from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, but hopefully you can see the poem and sort of ring along with me. A coward dies 1,000 deaths. A hero dies but once. No matter the total breaths, when it mattered, did you give your every ounce? The saddest part of cowardice, the sacrifice of peaceful sleep, to cold night sweats of moral vice, a haunted voice that makes you weep. Still, that twilight coliseum, a dreamscape for battling foes, a second chance for wrestling demons. Will you now go blow for blow? You may not win each contest. There will be trails of blood, but you may slowly lay to rest that nightmare-stalking brood. Each hour brings another choice, to take a stand or run. Even lacking true clear voice, in no way are you dumb. Dig deep for that ritual of shame you are near with fear or rage. Let a guide reveal a novel game. Get off the BS, be safe stage. Lurking in shadows psychic, bubbling lava, primal pain. Sculpt and dance until there's magic. Pygmalion's art shall rise again. No longer that once robot child, head twisting madly side to side. Yes, pursue the call of the wild. Beware that. Well, I tried. Learn to fail or fail to learn. Please forsake the craft of cool. Fiery spirit will once more burn when compassion and purpose rule. Thank you for letting me share this.
Oh,
and thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
I must admit, quite an eloquent poem that you have just illustrated indeed. So thank you very much. And once again, I really want to thank you, Mark, on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for taking the time to deliver this webinar on our platform. So thank you very much.
I just hope people learned half as much as I learned in the preparation. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure indeed they must have a lot of things to take away from this quick 60 minutes, but a very powerful one indeed. So thank you very much once again. And thank you all of those who participated in this webinar and for your questions. So we are recording this webinar, so please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming programs and webinars, and equally to access the recorded version. So with that note, I would like to end and conclude. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.